Thank you.
So if y'all would like to, a little icebreaker, sometimes if you want to tell us a comic you've read recently that you enjoyed or would like to share in the chat, while we let people kind of filter in for the next minute and a half, feel free. People are saying hi.
Hi, everybody.
Have y'all read anything lately that's truly blown your mind?
Hmm.
Are you reading anything lately, Zach?
No, I'm just playing a lot of video games. It's the only thing that like shuts my brain off real good lately. I really
Wow,
need a good brain shut off.
I hear you on that. Comics are usually quite engaging.
Yeah, I think I got a little burnt out on reading comics for a minute because I was the judge for the LA Times Book Prize for 2 years in a row,
Holy
which
crap.
was a lot of reading. So now I'm
That's a
giving
lot of
myself a little bit
reading.
of a break to catch up on video games and novels.
I can get that. I can get that. I do a giant splurge every year and just read piles of whatever new came out that year.
Piles is the way to do it. I think we're all
Yes,
we're
it
all
is.
pile people.
Yes, I love piles, piles and piles and piles of comics. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and get started with Blender for Cartoonists Absolute Beginner Demo. We have here today Zach Hazard. Vopin is a cartoonist and illustrator working on comics and games and a co-founder of the Cartoonist Cooperative. You can learn more about him and his work at his website, emosledge.com. And I'll go ahead and put this in the chat. So let me go ahead and stop sharing.
Okay, great.
Zach,
I'm going
go
to
ahead and
share
take
my
it
screen
away.
now. Let's see. No. What's going on? Hold on.
Is it letting you share?
It will in a second. I had to close and reopen Blender now.
You know what? I need to record. Forgot to hit record.
Recording
There
in
we go.
progress.
There we go.
Okay. Everyone can see that now,
Awesome.
right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I am. Oh, I'm going to get situated real quick and then I'll start explaining what's going on. So, I'm Zach Hazard-Vopin. This is Blender for Cartoonists. My goal for this workshop is to get everybody more comfortable using Blender. If I'm going to teach you some quick and dirty techniques to um, set up scenes, sort of like make reference material for yourself, just sort of like introduce you to the ecosystem of Blender so that um, further lessons that you want to take, like tutorials and stuff, are more comprehensible and easier to understand and less daunting because there really is a lot that Blender does. And I'm really only going to be covering a very small fraction, but I hope by the end of it, you'll feel comfortable using the program and kind of dropping things in and making stuff uh, that you wouldn't have been able to make before. So when you open Blender for the first time, this is what the screen should look like. You'll have, this quick setup menu. You can kind of ignore most of this stuff. The only thing that I recommend changing, and you don't have to do this, but I recommend it, where it says spacebar action, change it from play to search. That will allow you to search for pretty much anything that Blender does. If you forget how to do something, you forget where something is, you just have to press spacebar and you'll be able to search for it. So just press continue, and then I'm going to click away from this because none of this is important. Uh, so when you open up Blender, this is usually what you see. This is the default scene. You have a cube. Um, this is a camera, and this is a light. Uh, this is what happens when you press spacebar if you do that setting that I recommended. So let's say you forgot, how to add a sphere to the scene. You just type sphere and, oh yeah, there's a sphere. So you can, drop it in. I'm going to delete that though. Sorry, I'm going to be going real quick because there's a lot to cover. And I probably won't be able to check the chat too much until I get to the end, but at the end, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has, time willing. So first thing before I get started, I'm going to show you how to install extensions. So to do that, you go to Edit and Preferences, and that's how you change pretty much all the settings in Blender. Blender is very customizable, which is what's great about it, and also what kind of makes it daunting for a lot of people to use. But you can really do a lot with it. One extension that I do need to add is going to help me teach you Blender. So first thing, I'm going to allow online access from this Get Extensions tab on the side here. And then the first thing I need is called screencast keys. So you just start typing and whatever is available will come up. And I'm just going to install that. That's going to allow me to show you what keys I'm pressing because Blender is run on shortcuts. So it'll be a lot easier for you to understand what I am pressing and clicking without me having to say, I'm pressing the S button or something like that every 2 seconds. And the next extension that I highly recommend you install is called Bool Tool. I don't know why this is not installed automatically. It should just come already on because it's so useful, but I'm going to install that too. So again, to get there, you go to Edit and Preferences, and then it's in the Extensions tab. One other setting I'm going to change real quick is in the navigation. I'm going to change to Orbit Around Selection because I'm going to lose my mind if I have to use Blender's default way of getting through the scene. So this is called the scene. It's general area. That's the main window of Blender where everything happens. There's a toolbar on the side here that is hidden by default. Again, I don't know why. You can press a little arrow or you can press the N key to open it. And that's where some of the things you might need to change are, but also that's where extensions and add-ons get put. So screencast keys, which I was talking about before, I'm going to click that to turn it on. I'm going to make the font a little bit bigger so that everyone can read it easily. And now you can kind of see where I click, press keys. It'll show you that down in the lower left corner here. And then under Edit is something that says Boolean. This is Bool Tool. We'll go over that in a bit, though. So let's go over this scene. To navigate, you're going to want a 3-button mouse. It'll make things a lot easier. You press the middle mouse button to kind of rotate around the scene. If you hold Shift in the middle mouse button, you can pan left and right, up and down. You can also zoom in and out by scrolling the mouse wheel. If you don't have a 3-button mouse, you can go to Input and emulate 3-button mouse, and then it'll consider Alt left mouse to be the middle mouse button. Same thing with the numpad. Numpad is a really easy way to navigate around Blender also. If you don't have a numpad, though, you can just turn on this emulate numpad setting, and you can use the 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. keys on your normal keypad. What the numpad does is it allows you to just quickly rotate around the scene, switch from orthographic to perspective mode. Let me show you what the difference between that is. So perspective mode is generally the mode you're going to be in. Sometimes you want everything to be flat. You won't want no perspective. So you press 5 on the numpad, and that'll bring you to this orthographic view. We won't be going over that too much today. You probably won't need to use it for anything specifically that we'll be covering today. So you have the we call this the default cube. This is the cube that is just what they give you when you start Blender. Here's this camera. You need the camera to render because what Blender decides to render is what you see through the camera. To look through the camera view, you can press this camera right here. And that'll toggle in and out of the camera view. You can also press 0 on the numpad. That will also bring you in and out. Also, if you are in the camera view and you want to move the camera, the easiest way to do that is to switch to this view tab here and press camera to view. And then when you move around the scene, the camera is locked to your view. So I'm going to unclick that and I'm going to get out of the camera view. Then you have a light, which you can't see it do anything in this view. That's because there's a few different viewport views. There's the wireframe view. If you click in this upper right-hand corner, you can switch to wireframe. It just shows you the wireframe. This is the solid view. This is kind of the default view. It just shows you meshes and objects without any materials or textures applied. And this is the material preview view. It basically shows you what the materials and textures would look like on your objects, but with very bright lighting. The light still doesn't affect this. But if you go into the rendered view, which is the final view, this is basically what your scene is going to look like when you render it. And you can kind of see how lights affect things here. But let's go back to solid view for now. A few other things about the interface before I start showing you anything that you can actually make in here. There's this gizmo in the upper right. That's another way to navigate around the viewport. Then there's a 3D cursor, which is this thing right in the middle here. That determines where objects get placed if you add objects the normal way. You can also parent or kind of magnify. What's the word? You can basically stick objects to it. You can use it as an anchor point to rotate around. You can use it for a lot of things. We're not going to be using it a lot today, but I just wanted you to know what it is because it's just right there in the middle of the screen, and sometimes you'll click stuff and it'll move around, but you can move it by pressing the cursor up here, or if you press Shift and right click, that will also do it even if you don't have the cursor selected. You can also press Shift S to open up this menu if you want to bring the cursor back to the world origin. That doesn't really matter though. If you forget that, you'll still be fine. There's also, I should cover what the axes are. So this red one here is called the x-axis. This green one is called the y-axis. And there's a blue one that you can't see right now. That's the z-axis. So usually we think of the x-axis as being left and right, the y-axis as being front and back, and the z-axis as being up and down. You can kind of see them on this gizmo here too, and they're labeled if you forget which axis is which. If you're in 3D space though, it really, you could be all rotated around and then everything sort of changes and suddenly the Y is left and right and X is front and back. But let's get back to just the normal rotation again. There's this toolbar on the left here that has a lot of options that will make it so you can move and manipulate objects in object mode, which is the mode we're in now, but I'll go over modes in a second. When you click on something, that becomes the active object, and it gets this bright orange line around it. If you click two things, you'll see that the brighter one is the active object, and the other object that's not active has a or like a darker orange around it. That lets you know that you've selected multiple things, but some of the features in Blender require an active and non-active object, which we can go over when that comes up in a little bit. Uh, and then there's also the transform toolbar over here if you click item at the top. So there's a few ways to move objects around in Blender. The easiest way to explain how to do it is to just use these toolbar options. You can click this for moving, and then you can move on the y-axis or the x-axis or the z-axis, or kind of perpendicular to some of those axes. Get it back centered. This is for rotation. Again, rotate over the x-axis, over the y-axis, over the z-axis, and this white one just rotates to your view. And then this is for scaling. So if you click this outer circle, it'll make the entire thing scalable. Otherwise, you can just scale on the axis that you want to scale on. Oops, that's the wrong one. I'm not clicking the Y one for some reason. There we go. And then this one has all of the options. That way, if you don't feel like clicking between those, you have all the options right here. And then another way you can move stuff around is by using this transform window on the side here. So if you change the location, if you need it to be an extremely exact spot, if you need an extremely exact rotation or a specific scale, you can change the dimensions. Right now it's in meters, but you can change it to inches or whatever in the settings if you need to. But that's another way to move stuff around. I'm going to get back into this selection tool because that's what I like. But the easiest way to move stuff around is using shortcuts. So you just have to remember that to move objects around, you want to press G because Blender thinks of this as grabbing the object. So it's G for grab. You can grab it, move it around. It just stays on your mouse. You don't have to hold a click or anything. And then if you see where you want to put it, you can left click to place it. You could also, if you don't like where it is or you don't want to select this object, you can right click and it'll cancel it out. If you want to move it on the x-axis, you just press X. If you want to move it on the y-axis, you press Y. Same for the z-axis. For scaling, it's S. So that scales things normally. S plus Z, S plus X, S plus Y. You kind of get the idea. And it's the same thing for rotation, which is just R. Rotates to your view. Rotate on the x-axis. Rotate on the y-axis. Rotate on the z-axis. You're mostly in Blender going to just be moving, scaling, and rotating objects. But, what if you want to do something with something that isn't a cube? Let's delete the cube. If you press X, that'll delete whatever is selected. There's a few ways to add objects. You can go up to this menu at the top that says Add, and then select Mesh, which is going to be where 99% of the stuff you want to add is. And then you have a bunch of different primitives you can add. So let's add a sphere. Why not? So now we have a sphere. You could also, most common way to add objects is to press Shift A, and that brings up the same menu without you having to drag your mouse all the way up to the top. So that's where everything is. If you want to add a plane, plane is a good thing if you want to have a floor, or if you rotate it on the x-axis, you can make a wall, etc. Another way to add an object, which is a new thing, and I think this is great, if you go to the toolbar on the left, there's this option that says Add Cube. If you click it, you can add a few different things. This works a little bit differently. when you click on it, you'll see this little grid that is showing you sort of the surface where you'll be placing the object. So we have a cube now. I'm going to drag it out, and then I can drag it up, and I can have exactly the shape of cube that I want. You can also add another one right on top of it, right in front of it. Super useful, extremely easy. Love this feature. You actually pay for an add-on that does a similar thing because Blender did not used to do this on its own. You can even do it with spheres. So you drag out a sphere. You can make it whatever size you want. If you want it to just be a perfect sphere, hold Shift, and that'll make it even. Let's see. If you press A, that'll select everything. And you can, move everything around or do whatever you want. If you want to duplicate an object, you just select it and you press Shift D and move your mouse around. You can place it wherever you want. If you want to place it in the exact same place as the object you're copying, you just right click and it'll be right there. I already showed you to delete, you press X. And then if you want to change modes, you press Tab or Control Tab. But I'm going to show you modes in just a second after I quickly mention how to add a curve, because curves are very useful. They're not quite as easy to use as primitives are, but you go up to the Add menu, Add, and Bezier curve's the easiest. So it adds it to where the 3D cursor is, so let's move it where you can see it. It just looks like a little line right now, and it's not going to be very useful to you. But if you click on the right-hand side here, this tab that looks like a little curve, it says Data. If you click on that, you can scroll down where it says Geometry. You click Geometry, scroll down more, and where it says Bevel, you could just scroll on this depth to make it whatever thickness you want. I always recommend filling the caps too. And you have a little curve object, which is useful for a variety of things. I'll show you in a few. I wish it was easier to get to this point, or you can just add a curve like this already. But if you forget how to do this, this is being recorded. Well, you can look back at it, and also you can just search online for how to add a curve or how to add a thickness to a curve by using the bevel under geometry. But now I'm going to show you a different mode because you're limited in object mode. This is mostly for the mode for moving objects around, setting up a scene, but not really so much for editing the mesh or changing the shape other than scaling the heights and widths and stuff like that. So if you want to edit the mesh, select whatever object you want to edit, and then in these modes in the top left, you can click Edit Mode. You could also just hit Tab. It'll take you right into Edit Mode. No matter what mode you're in, if you hit Tab, it'll take you in and out of Edit Mode. So you'll probably be clicking Tab a lot. And then there are 3 different little sub modes within Edit Mode. There's the Vertex mode, where you can select just the vertices. There is Edge mode, where you can select all of the edges. Again, that's up here. You just click up here. And then there's Face mode, where you can select the faces. Depending on what you're trying to do, you'll want to use any one of these modes. But as far as manipulating things, it works the same way as an object mode. There's, the move and scale and rotate buttons inside here. There is also the same shortcuts apply. So G is for grab, S is for scale, R is for rotate. Let's see. So you'll want to also be able to add more geometry to be able to change the shapes more. You probably want to do more than make cones and different rhombuses and stuff like that. So one way to do that is to subdivide. if you want to subdivide, press A to select everything, or you can select just one face or something. But you right click and you press subdivide, and what that does is it just divides each face into smaller faces that you can now manipulate. So you can change the shape a little bit more specifically this way. I want to show you one more thing. If you subdivide, you can also click open this menu in the bottom, which again, I think that Blender should automatically have open, but they do it the way that they do it. So if you want to subdivide it many times, you could just up the number of cuts here. And then you have a whole bunch of geometry. You could, you know, do whatever I'm doing right now. uh, Another way to add geometry is to add what's called edge loops. If you press Control and R, you'll see a little box highlighted depending on your orientation, and it will just, if you click, it'll add it. You can choose where to move it. If you want it just in the center, you can right click and it'll leave it right there. And now you have a little bit more geometry to work with. This is useful if you don't want to add a ton of geometry, but you need just like a line or two, because the more geometry you add, the slower your computer is going to be. Geometry is kind of like resolution in 3D modeling. Uh, Other ways to manipulate the mesh, you can extrude things. Let's go into face mode. It's easiest to do all this stuff in face mode. So let's select this face. Extruding is a very useful technique. If you press E, you can just extrude up. You just select the face, press E, move it out. You can also do it by clicking extrude region here and then doing it that way. If you can't remember the shortcut. You can also inset the faces by pressing I, which means that it will make the face a little smaller. That way, if you want to have a smaller cube coming out of the cube, you can do it that way. You can also invert it or inset it this way, and then you press E, you can bevel it in. Now you have a little more hollow of a shape. Uh, Deleting works the same way. You press X to delete, but you can choose to either delete the vertices, the edges, or the faces, depending on what mode you're in or depending on what you're trying to do. Let's just delete this face for a second. Um, so let's say you deleted a face and you didn't want to do that. Let's go into edge mode. What you can do is you just select the edges that you want the face to fill inside of. You just press F, and it brings the face right back. Now you have a face again, and you don't have a weird mesh with a hole in it. Another really important feature that you want to use for modeling is beveling. So if you, let's actually select this edge. If you select an edge and you just press Control B, you can bevel it. If you scroll with the mouse wheel, it'll add more loops and make it a little smoother. So if you just want it chamfered or something like that, you could just leave it at the lowest setting. You scroll the mouse wheel up to add more, the more round you want it. And you can also change it in this menu in the lower corner, especially if you don't have a scroll wheel to do this with. And you can also bevel by selecting it right here. And same thing pretty much. Okay, and then let's go back to object mode for a moment. This is another really great feature that was not in Blender before, but is now. There's this thing called box carve. I think it turns on when you install a Bool tool, but if you click on it, there's a few options. There's box, circle, and polyline. So if you have box curve, you can do this in either object mode or in edit mode. It works for both. Um, all you have to do is you have it selected. If you want to delete a big section, you just click like that and it'll delete stuff. You do it for a circle shape too. Press shift if you want it to be a perfect circle. It does it based on your view. So this is a situation where orthographic view works a little bit better. Oop, I think I did too many things. Here, let's try that again. Perfect. Now I got a big hole in there. And then polyline works similarly, but the way it works is you click once, click again, click again, click again. And if you're done, you just press enter. And now it cut a big section out. This is extremely useful, and I wish that this was in Blender when I had first started out. It would have made things a lot easier for me. Again, this is another thing that I actually pay for an add-on for because this feature was not in Blender before. Um, Now, I also want to show you modifiers really quickly. I don't want to get too in the weeds with this because modifiers can get pretty complicated, but there's a couple that are very, very useful. Um, to add a modifier, you click this wrench, which is the modifiers tab, and you click add modifier. You also have to have whatever you want to add the modifier to selected. So let's add a mirror modifier. Uh, if we add a mirror modifier, you press add modifier. You can find it in these menus. I always forget where they are, so I just search for mirror, and there you go. Now you have a symmetrical model. If you want to do anything symmetrical, you want to use the mirror modifier. Modifiers are kind of a way to have live sort of things like live and not applied yet. So even though I have this modifier on, I can modify things and it won't affect it won't turn the modifier off. So let's tab back into edit mode. If I select everything and move it, you can kind of see it's still mirrored, but I can change how the symmetry works. If I tab back into object mode, you can see everything is together, and that's sort of how the mirror affects things in different modes, or how modifiers affect things in different modes. Once you're done with the mirror modifier, though, you can press this down arrow and apply it, and now everything is applied. So it's uh, it's set. You can't move it around like I was just doing before, and have everything symmetrical. The other modifier that's very useful is called the subdivision surface modifier. That's another way to add a lot of geometry to your model to up the resolution. It also smooths things. So let's do it to this cube so you can really see what it's doing. I'm just going to also delete this and this. So let's go to this cube, add a modifier, search. If I just type subdivision surface will be the first thing that comes up. This is used very often. So you can click that, and you can see it's added more geometry, but it's also smoothed it out. It's turned the square into a little bit of a circle. And then the levels just kind of shows how many subdivisions it makes. As we make more subdivisions, the more spherical it becomes. This is really useful if you're trying to make an object that is easy to sculpt on and stuff like that. And this works the same way. You can apply it when you're done. A quicker way to add that modifier is to press control and whatever level that you wanted it subdivided to. So if you wanted to subdivide it 2 times, you press control 2, it'll automatically add that 2 levels of subdivision. Again, this is one of those things that if you don't remember the word subdivision or subdivision surface modifier, you can probably Google around and you'll be able to find it, or you can check back on this video. So let's apply this. And then one last thing I want to show you before we get into sculpting is how to manipulate this curve. now that we made the curve with the bevel, which was under geometry, and bevel and depth. So if I press tab, that brings me to the edit mode for curves. The way it works is very similar if you've used any sort of vector program like Illustrator. You have handles that you can use to move the curve around. You press R to rotate the curve. You can also press G and grab any of these handles. You can move them in and out to manipulate the shape. Works very similarly to Bezier curve in any other program if you've used it. If you haven't, just remember that you can rotate, grab, but you can scale, but it will not scale the thickness. It will just scale the handles. So, without further ado, let's move on to sculpting. So you can get to the sculpt mode by clicking these modes in the top and pressing sculpt mode. You can also get there by pressing Control and Tab, and that will bring you what's called the modes pie. It's a pie menu where you can select whatever mode you want to be in. So you can select object mode, you can select sculpt mode. If you forget, you can just go up here and change the mode up here. When you go into sculpt mode, the first thing you'll see is, you have this brush. This is called the draw brush. It's the kind of the default Blender brush. I'm not going to go over too many brushes. I'm just going to show you a few that are the most commonly used and that you're going to want to use the most. You can, we already have added some geometry to this, but you know what? Let me show you what happens if you try to sculpt on something with too low of a geometry. Let's delete this object. Let's add another cube, and let's subdivide it one time. And I'm going to apply the subdivision. So now if I go into sculpt mode and I try to sculpt on it, kind of not a lot happens. I can't draw anything cool on there. It's just kind of moving around. It's because it only affects the vertex points. So the more resolution you have, the easier, not the easier time you're going to have sculpting, but you'll be able to create more detail with sculpting. So how can we add more geometry? I've already shown you a couple ways, but we can also add geometry without having to actually leave sculpt mode. One of those ways is to go up to the corner here and go to remesh, and you can change the size that you want the individual faces to be. It doesn't really matter what the size is. Just mess around with it and see what you like. The smaller you make it, the more resolution you'll have. So you just click remesh, and suddenly you have more resolution to sculpt with. Another way to add resolution and geometry is to use Dyn Topo, which is up in the corner here. You click this check mark to turn it on, and what it does is I usually like to bring this brush size down quite a bit. Basically, the way that it works is rather than adding geometry everywhere, it will only add it to certain parts. So you can see that, I was able to sculpt on there all of a sudden, but let's see what that looks like in edit mode. So now you can see it only added resolution where I was sculpting and, added some extra resolution around it just for architectural purposes. But you can kind of see how that works. So oftentimes it'll turn itself back off after you've changed views. You want to turn it off basically when you're done using it because you can run into a lot of problems if you leave it on. But let's go back to object mode, and I'm just going to add resolution real quickly like this and apply. Back into sculpt mode, I'm going to go over, well, first, most of the time when you're sculpting, you'll want symmetry on. To do that, you go up into this upper right corner where this little butterfly is. You can press X to mirror it over the X-axis, Y does it on the y-axis. Actually, I have X still clicked, but you can kind of see. And then Z does it like that. If you select all of them, you can kind of get the idea. Most commonly, you'll just want the x-axis, which I'm going to leave on right now. So you can also change the size of your brush by pressing F. That way, if you want to sculpt big or little, you just press F, or you can change the size up in the top menu bar up here. If you want to change the strength, you can do that. You can click here to add pressure sensitivity. You do that, the same thing for the radius or the size of the brush. And it works the same way for all the brushes. If you want it to come out, you just leave it on this plus like normal. If you press this minus, it will sculpt inwards. Can also just hold control and it'll sculpt inwards, which is much quicker. I literally never press these. So here's a couple brushes that you're going to want to use. The draw brush is the most common brush that you want to use. There's also the grab brush or the move brush, whatever you want to call it. Kind of works if you want to just sort of drag stuff out. There's also the snake hook brush. All the brushes are down here. If you bring this menu up, it's a little easier to see. You can scroll through this way, or you can press these tabs over here. So there's also the snake hook brush, which you can click there, or you can press K to find it. It's like the move brush, except for it's really a lot more snaky. It's kind of hard to describe, but you can just kind of pull stuff a lot farther than you could with the move brush or the grab brush. So if I press G, that'll bring me back to the grab brush. You can kind of see the difference between that and the snake hook. Snake hook also works really great in Dynatopo mode because Dynatopo just adds geometry as you're sculpting, so you can kind of just pull it indefinitely if Dynatopo is on. Is also the clay strips brush. If you press C, it'll bring you there, or you click this one right here. This is really good for building up forms. If you don't want to, draw any specific detail, you're just trying to draw like muscle mass or just like add a little thickness to certain areas, the clay strips brush is the one you want to use the most. If you want to smooth stuff out, you just hold shift and that smooths everything. So you're going to be pressing shift a lot probably. There's a flatten tool which flattens stuff out, but I prefer the scrape tool for flattening stuff out. Basically, it just makes different planes a little flatter. So it's good if you're trying to do kind of like anything not as organic, but you want to do it in sculpt mode for whatever reason, probably because it's faster. I do this a lot. I don't like modeling as much as I like sculpting. So I'll do that frequently. There's also the crease brush. If you want to add creases, which you probably will pretty frequently, this brush is great for that. Here we go. I was on the wrong brush. So you can kind of see how that works. There's also the pose brush. So let me go into Dynatopo and pull and give this guy a little tentacle. There's this pose brush, which is super useful. You used to have to rig everything if you wanted to move anything, but now you can just kind of resize the brush and you can sort of see this white line that'll show you where it's going to pivot. And there you go. You can use this to quickly pose stuff or manipulate your mesh in other ways too. And then finally, the last tool I'm going to show you is the masking tool, which you can press M, or you can actually click it up here. And there's actually a bunch of different things you can do with masks, but basically masking works in this program like it does in other programs. What you have masked doesn't get affected. Oops, I still have Dynatopo. Wondering why my computer is going a little slower. So you can kind of see it doesn't affect anything that's masked. If I press Control I, it inverts the selection, and now I can manipulate what's in here. And then if I want to get rid of it, I just press Alt M. There's also a whole mask menu with a whole bunch of different stuff that you can do. This lasso mask makes it easier to select stuff. And then you can also use these trim tools on the left side here. Box trim, which will allow you to trim away certain parts, kind of like that other tool I was showing earlier in object mode. You can also do it with a lasso. And the line trim works like this. Wherever this gradient is, that'll be what gets cut off. And then polyline trim works the same as the other polyline. Just click until you're done and you press enter. And then you have like barely any of your mesh left because you've gone so crazy. Let's see. Now we can go over materials real quickly. Let me bring it back to a less crazy looking thing. So let's get back to object mode. Also, another thing you can do if you don't like how faceted everything looks, you can right click and just press shape smooth. Now everything looks nice and smooth. Materials. So materials are also in this panel on the right. Really, you're going to just be kind of wrestling with the where the menus are for everything in Blender. That is the biggest hiccup of Blender, but you'll eventually learn its logic. So if you click material, you can add materials. You can't see any materials in this view, so let's go to the material preview view. So when you're in this view, whatever object you have selected, you can press new. It'll add a material. Now you can change the color like this. You can make it metallic by bringing this slider up. I don't really know why it's a slider. Things are either metallic or they're not, but sometimes I do get some use out of like 30% metallic. You can also change the roughness. That roughness is how shiny something is. If it's really rough, it's not shiny at all. If it's not very rough, it's very shiny. Ignore the rest of these. You don't need to know about them. For now, all you need to know is how to change the colors, how to change the roughness, and how to make it metal or not. Let's see. So that's pretty much all the basics for Blender. So we're going to quickly make Inkling and Nibford now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start a new project. I want to get rid of all the junk in here. I'm not going to save it. And I'm going to delete the default cube because I don't like it. And I'm going to quickly show you one more thing. If you want to make a new panel window, you can kind of click in the corner. You click and drag, and it'll drag out this thing. I'm going to just use this so that I have my reference material. Copy the link. So there's a whole bunch of different window types. You're not going to want to use most of these in the short term. For now, I'm just going to go change this to from up here. Go change it to image editor, and then if I actually going to widen this a little bit, go to open, and I'm just going to open this reference that I made. This is a good way to add reference if you don't have a better way to view reference on your computer. I usually just use PureRef or something, and that's what I recommend doing. But if you want to look at your reference within Blender, you can do that by clicking that. and setting it up in a little window on the left here, or wherever you want. You can also change this window to be an image editor as well, but let's just keep that as it is. Also, I forgot to show you the scene collection. This is where all of the objects are. So it basically is like your layers, and that's if you need to. Let's say you have like a whole bunch of let's say you have a whole bunch of objects. I'm just going to duplicate this, and they're all like overlapping each other. And you want to select a specific one, but you're not able to click the right one, but you remember what you named it because you can change the name of the stuff. So if you double click, you can just name it whatever you want. And this is a quick way to find stuff in your scene once it gets overwhelming. So let's delete that, and let's get started making Inkling first. Inkling is a cube, kind of. I don't like having the axes cutting through the cube for some reason, so I like to bring it up a little bit. Let's go into edit mode. So now that I'm in edit mode, I'm going to select face mode, and I'm going to press S to shrink this down. Screencast keys isn't working. I'm going to turn it back on so that you can see it. Okay, so there we go. S to scale. This is too tall though, and maybe too scaled. So let's press G and Z to bring it down on the Z axis a little bit. Maybe this is a little bit, needs to be a little bit wider. And now we got kind of the basic shape of Nibford. Now if I press A and Control B, I can bevel everything. So we can have a nice smoother shape for Inkling. And just click, and there you go. Let's see. Now we can add their little spout at the top. So let's do that by adding a cylinder with this thingy. So I find it easier to do this stuff in orthographic mode at the top. So let's see. That's too small. That was not a good way to do it. All right, now we have a little spout. Let's inset it a little bit there and center it a little bit more. Again, this is quick and dirty. This isn't like making game ready assets. This is just to make good reference material quickly. So let's go into edit mode. And if I select this top face, I can press E, which I would usually use to extrude up, but I'm going to right click and then just press S because it extrudes it but just leaves it there. And now I can scale it out, extrude it again, press I to inset it, and then extrude it inwards. And now I can select the edges so we can round them out. If you hold Alt and you select just any one of these edges, it'll select the entire edge loop. So if you hold Shift, you can select multiple things. So let's do that. And let's bevel that again. Cool. Now we have that. I don't like how faceted it is, so I'm going to shade auto smooth, and I'm going to do the same thing to the body. I'm going to inset this just a little bit more. And now I'm going to show you how Bool Tool works real quickly, because I want to combine these two shapes. So if I select the both shapes that I want, making sure that the main shape that I want it to merge into is the active, which means that it has the brighter orange line around it. And then I just press Union. And now it's just one mesh. I'm also going to press Alt, select the edge loop. It's a little cut off because of this line here. But if I press Control B, I can bevel it. It looks a lot nicer. Let's add some eyes. We can also do that with this tool. It's a little thicker than I wanted it. There we go. And let's kind of just flatten it out there a little bit. I'm also going to make it actually, no, make it a little wider. Uh, and now I want to mirror this because I want Nipford to have two eyes. So if I go to the modifier, search, and add a mirror modifier, you don't see anything at first because I need to select an object for it to mirror over. So if I wanted to mirror across an object, I press this little eyedropper here under mirror object, and I select the cube because that's where I want it to mirror over. Now, you can move it around, and we have, basically some eyes. And I am going to apply that because I don't think I'm going to move that anymore. And I'm going to shade smooth because I don't like how faceted it looks. Let's also add a little nose. Nope, it's too big. There we go. Now they've got a little nose. We can also add some arms now. Actually, no, let's add the boots first. So for the boots, I'm going to start with a cube, shrink it down, SZ to make it a little taller. And let's look from the bottom here, move it into place. Maybe we can make it a little bit bigger too. If I press G and Z, can bring it up, and actually it is a little big. So let's go into edit mode. Obviously a boot is not a cube, but that's just what we're starting with. If I press Control R, I can add that edge loop I was talking about earlier. And then I can go into face mode, select this face, extrude it out. Now we're kind of getting to a boot shape. If I go into edge mode, I can bring that down. I can also go back into face mode, make this a little bit smaller, flatten it back down a little bit, and then can add the little heel to the boot by using the polyline carve. So click, click, and click, and enter. And now we have most of a boot shape. So if I go back into object mode and I press Control 1, you can see I've added a subdivision surface modifier, and it's looking a little bit more boot shape. Let's add just a little bit more geometry, and now, well, I'm going to shade smooth first, and then let's go into sculpt mode. Actually, sorry. Let's go back into object mode real quick because I want to apply that modifier. Now we can go into sculpt mode and turn on the symmetry. Press G to get the move tool, or you can press the grab tool over here. Make it a little bit bigger. Now we can sort of start shaping the boot to be a little bit more boot shaped. Smooth it with S a little bit. Bring it up. I can use the scrape tool to flatten the bottom out just a little bit. You can also go back to the grab tool, make this heel a little taller, give it a little bit more shape. And let's make it pointy. Should be pointy. All right. Now if I press Control Tab, that'll bring me back into object mode. And I'm just going to press Shift D to duplicate the boot. I'm going to press X to move it along the X-axis. And now Nipford's got some boots. Let's rotate them out a little bit. Oh, you know what? Actually, I am going to use the mirror modifier again. So let's add a modifier, mirror modifier, and the object that I'm mirroring it over is still the Nipford or the Inkling body. If I rotate on the Z-axis, that looks a little nicer. I'm going to rotate it out a little bit. All right, now let's add some arms. So to do that, we're going to use a curve. So if I press Shift A, I go to Curve and Bezier. Let's move that out over here. Go down to this curve little thing, click Geometry, and add depth, and fill the caps. And let's make it a little skinnier. Okay, now I can move this kind of into place just to get started. Let's go into edit mode. Just G and R to rotate and move it around. Now you got the makings of an arm. Let's make it a little skinnier. And back to object mode. So I can duplicate this and give Inkling another arm. And then I can press Shift A to add a UV sphere, which is the sphere that I like to use, but you can choose whatever sphere from the primitives that you want. Move it into place. And you got one hand. Let's shade it smooth. Shift D to duplicate it. And you have two hands. One more thing we can do real quickly is add this ink blot coming out. So if I press Shift D on this sphere, because I don't need to add a sphere every single time if I already have spheres in the scene. I can move it over here, shrink it down, go into sculpt mode, and then with the move tool, I could just drag it across. And then I can smooth it out on the bottom. If I press I, that'll bring me to the inflate brush. I can inflate this a little bit. And that's it. Go back to object mode, move it into place, rotate it a little bit. Now Inkling's got some ink. But what about the mouth? How are we going to do that? So let's go into sculpt mode. Let's turn on symmetry. And let's turn on Dyntopo, because I don't want to add a lot of geometry. I just want to add a little mouth. So if I go to the crease brush with Shift C, or press here. No, wait. There we go. I can add a little mouth. Oh, wait. Let me turn this brush really small because I need more geometry. So now I can add a little smile, add his little smile creases. And there you go. If you want to add a little bit more definition, press G, move this out a little bit, not to where it's covering up the other objects. Maybe press C to go to the clay buildup brush, clay strips brush, and add some cheeks, smooth them out. And now uh, we have Inkling. If I move him over a little bit, we can make Nibford 2. So the way that I like to make Nibford is to start with a cylinder, shrink it down, move it over here, and if I go into edit mode and face mode, I can select this face. I'm going to press G to bring it up quite a bit first. I'm going to make this bottom really small. I'm going to extrude this and extrude it one more time. Shrink this down just a little bit. And I'm going to bevel that by pressing Control B. I'm going to bevel the bottom also by pressing Control V, Control B. Go to Edge mode, select these two edges with Alt and Shift, and then press Control B again and bevel it some more. I also want to add some more geometry just so that we can make this shape a little smoother. So I'm going to do that by pressing Control R, add a whole bunch of edge loops, add a bunch of edge loops up here too. And now I'm going to switch to sculpt mode to smooth it out. I'm going to press I for the inflate brush. Inflate things just a little bit. Press Shift to smooth it. And I feel like that looks good enough. So let's go to object mode, shade smooth, just for my own sanity. And now let's make Nibford's nib head. So to do that, I'm going to make a plane. I'm going to shift right click to move the 3D cursor there, just so that I don't have to move the plane from the origin right here. Shift A, add a plane. And again, you can add it from the add menu too in mesh plane. RX, and then let's rotate that so that it's facing us perpendicular. Shrink it down. And if I go into edit mode, I can select this edge, E to extrude it, and Z to extrude it up, S to widen that out, E to extrude it up, and S to shrink it down a little bit, E to extrude it up more, S to shrink it down again, and then E and Z to move it up again. And make it just slightly wider at the top. Now I can bevel some of these lines so that it's smoother, because it shouldn't be all hard edges like that. And then I'm going to press Control R because I want to add a bunch more geometry this way as well. And do it here and up here as well. Now I want to use the carve tool to make the top of the nib part. So it's easy as clicking out a box. Oops, I have to select everything first. Huh, that's odd. It is not working now. Try this again. Of course, this worked totally fine in every other trial run I did. And now it's not. Hmm. Very odd. Okay, let me try one more thing to see if this works. Actually, no, I'll just do it from object mode. Maybe that will work. Yes. Okay, so if I do it in object mode, that works. I don't know why it is doing this, but Blender is a free software, so sometimes it is a little glitchy. So I added a line there, add a circle, and now you got kind of a nib shape. If I go into sculpt mode, turn on symmetry, I can fix the shape of the head a little bit, make it a little bit more nib-like. I'm just using the move brush and then holding shift and smoothing things out occasionally. And then we want to give it a little bit of depth.
Yeah.
So to do
So
that,
do that.
I just use the
I just use
move
the
tool
move
to pull it
tool.
out like this. Now, this is a little too flat looking for a nib. So let's go back into edit mode. If I press E, it'll extrude it out a little bit. Now we have just a little bit of depth to work with. If I go back to object mode, I can let's add some eyes to Nipford. Same way as for Inkling. So that and just a little bit of depth. Perfect. Now I can move it over and we can mirror it. And I'll select the nib as my object. And now we got some eyes. We also need a little bit of mouth. So let's add a mouth. I go to the crease brush. It says easy as doing that. This looks bad though because there's not enough resolution. So let's go back to object mode. Press Control 2 to add a bunch more resolution. Apply. Back into sculpt mode. That looks much better. And last but not least, Nipford deserves arms too. So we can just copy this arm, shrink it down a little bit. And can duplicate it, rotate it around. Now we got some arms. Yay! But they don't have any textures or colors or anything. So let's quickly add some color after I finish rotating them around to my satisfaction. Uh, so let's go into the viewport shading mode. And honestly, like if you're at this point and you're done, you're just trying to make something that you're going to trace later or use as just a reference for form, you can just screenshot this. If you click this option up here, it'll turn off all the extra junk. If you go to view and viewport render image, it'll just render what's in the viewport really quickly for you, and you could save it that way. But let's say you want to add some color. So let's start here. Add a new color. I like using this kind of dark gray, and then let's lower the roughness a little bit, make it a little shinier because it should be a little shiny. Then for the boots, same thing, except for they're just black and they're also a little shiny. The ink would probably be similar to the boots. So I can just reuse the same material. There's a few ways to do it. The easiest way is to just click this this little thing next to the material name, but you can change the material name if you want to make it easier to find. So let's call this boot. You can drag that just right onto whatever you want to color. Another way you can do that, though, is to also click this on the material or on the object that you're on to select whatever material you need to grab. Uh, let's add the same material color to Inkling's arms and hands. And then I like to give them a little purple nose. Same thing for Nipford's body. Just add a new object, make it black. We can make it less shiny than the other blacks. Uh, we can add it to the arms by dragging. And then Inkling's nib head would definitely be metallic, so just turn metal all the way up and can make their hands the same color. If you want to make it a little bit of a darker metal, you can just lower this here. And then we can add some pupils to the eyes. So we go here, click new. We need to go into sculpt mode now, because that's how you can paint. If you click this paintbrush here, that opens that allows you to paint stuff. You can click paint to choose different brushes, but we're just going to use the default one. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. And now to see anything that you paint, unfortunately, if I just do it, it doesn't see anything because I haven't added it as a material, which this is another thing that they should make a little easier in Blender. But the way that you do it is next to base color, you click this button, change it to color attribute. And now you can see where I drew it. There's two colors up here. You can change your colors this way. The color on the left is what your default is. If you hold control, it'll paint the color on the right. So that's a good way to erase really quickly. So it also depends on the resolution of your mesh. So depending on how much mesh you have, you'll be able to draw more or less pixelated. So let's add a little bit more resolution really quickly by just pressing Control 2, going to the Modifiers tab and applying that. And now if we go back to sculpt mode, I can draw on some little pupils. Oop. And now we can just do the same thing for Nipford. Go to sculpt mode, draw something that you can't see, add a new object or add a new material to the object, go to base color, change it to color attribute. And this is also to low res. So if we go back to object mode, I can press, first I gotta apply the mirror because it's not applied yet, so everything is still mirrored. But if I press Control 2, it'll add some more resolution. I can apply it and then go back into sculpt mode. And there we go. We have Inkling and Nipford. So one last thing I want to show you before I take questions. If we go into rendered mode, you can kind of see how the light is affecting this. This is what will be rendered if I pressed render and we were looking, through the camera. This point light that it gives you is obviously not enough. What I recommend is adding a sun. So if you press Shift A or go to the add menu in the top, you can go down to lights and add a sun. And if you rotate it around, you can kind of see how it affects stuff. If you press R twice, you can do this for anything. Press R twice, you can rotate it in any direction, which makes using the sun a lot easier. You can also go down to this light bulb down here and increase the strength. looks a little creepy, but you know, you'll get used to lighting your scenes. And then if you wanted to change the background color, you could just go up to this world and click color and change it to whatever you want. And one absolute last thing I want to show you, because I know people want to know how to do this. If you want to add line art to what you're looking at, first you have to be looking through the camera. So let's go to the camera real quick. Also, you want to change the size of the camera. You click output up here. And you can, you know, change it to whatever pixel resolution you want. But let's go to view, camera to view, so that it's locked, and we can get a better look at Inkling and Nibford. Unclick that. And now if I press Shift A, and again, this is in the add menu as well, and you go down to grease pencil, you press scene line art, it'll add line art. Now, you can change the thickness and everything from this menu at the bottom. A quicker way to do it is to go to the Modifiers tab, because it is a modifier. And you know, let's click away just so you can see these lines are a little too thick right now. Just make it a little bit smaller. You can also change the color if you go down to the material and change the color here. Just wanted to show you this real quickly. The reason you have to look at it through the camera view, though, is because it only recognizes the edges through the camera. So it generates based on where the camera is. You can kind of see how it doesn't actually go all the way around. It's just an illusion of the camera. But if you move the camera, it will change with the camera view. So that is it. And I am ready for questions if we have some time.
First of all, that was amazing. I think my brain broke in every good way.
Okay, good. I hope I didn't like go too fast or make it
Nope.
more confusing.
Nope, your pacing was great. And that's why this is recorded, because we can go back and do, I feel like I can go through now and do a step-by-step along with the recording.
Totally. And I recommend, you know, you don't have to do step by step. I've never followed a tutorial step by step, but
Yeah.
the more of these tutorials you watch, you'll just sort of absorb the knowledge of Blender and it will start making sense. Because honestly, the hardest part is the hurdle of understanding working in 3D space when you're used to just drawing in 2D.
Yeah. Yeah, just getting used to the space itself. So, oh, we have a question. So first question's popped up from Jesse. I don't know if you want to read them. Do you want me to read them aloud for you, or do you want to?
Yeah, read them aloud for me. That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Jesse says, question, what's the most common mistake you see newbies do?
Oh, I don't know. There are so many. This is getting a little bit into the weeds, but one thing that will make all new users of 3D software lose their minds is normals. Normals are what tells the computer the direction of the surfaces. So let's turn off this line art really quickly. So right now, this surface, imagine that this is the outside, and everything that's inside the mesh is the inside. Normals get flipped really easily, and sometimes Blender will think the outside of your mesh is the inside. And if the normals are flipped here, I'm gonna flip the normals really quickly just to show you what happens. So let's go into edit mode. If I press Alt N, I can flip the normals. You can't see any difference really, but if I go into sculpt mode and let's use the draw brush, it will make everything go in because it thinks that this is the outside or this is the inside. So it thinks that I'm trying to I'm trying to sculpt from the inside, but I'm not. And this is extremely frustrating. I probably you know, snapped at least three styluses in half trying to figure it out when I was first learning Blender like 8 years ago. So if you ever find that things aren't working right, Google flipped normals and try to figure out how to unflip your normals.
Yeah. You've saved us several styluses split in half, hopefully. Jay Scott says, hi, Zach, good job. I have a question. Can I use a grease pencil to draw directly on the 3D model, or will it always be a camera perspective line work layer?
you can definitely draw with grease pencil directly on the model. If I'm trying to think, because I don't use the grease pencil that often these days. Um, it's so let's see. Let's make a new grease pencil object. I'm trying to see if there's like an easy way for me to just show how to draw. I haven't used a grease pencil in so long, so forgive me if I like can't figure this out really quickly. Um, I think so. Okay, yeah. So if you go to placement up here, you can do surface, and that'll do the surface of whatever you have selected, as opposed to just your view, which obviously just stays with the view, or the 3D cursor, which is this guy up here.
That's fascinating. Wow. It's disorienting too.
Yeah.
R. Bivens has a really good question. Can you explain how, if there is a difference between how the file works when you paint directly onto the model versus if you're importing an image for a texture on your mesh? Like if you've painted on the eyes, does that exist as a texture file, or how is that information stored?
Okay, so the reason that the mesh resolution affected the resolution of what I was painting is because when you paint in sculpt mode, it uses something called vertex painting. So it's painting directly onto the vertex, and the vertex is storing that information, so it's not in an image file. If you wanted to add a an image as your texture, or if you wanted to paint an image texture, you could just go up to this texture paint mode, and it'll take you into texture paint where you can create a new texture. You would have to press new up here. Also, if you do this, you're going to want to go to image and save the image, because if you close Blender after drawing everything, it'll just disappear. But there's a whole lot of extra steps to this to actually make it work. So I'm not going to go over that in depth right now, because you have to be able to unwrap the mesh and add UVs, stuff like that. Stuff that is like beyond the scope of this. It's a lot easier to just use the paintbrush in sculpt mode and paint right on the vertex, even though you do have to increase the resolution a whole bunch to make it work. The benefit of texturing with an image is that you can do it on a really low res mesh and still have really nice, crisp details.
Yeah. So if we want to learn how to do that, basically that's a whole other tutorial though.
Exactly.
Yeah. Jesse asks, you mentioned how many extensions are available. Do you have any that you use all the time in addition to those we saw today?
Yes, I use a lot of extensions. My my most used ones are probably there's probably ones I'm not even thinking of, but I use this one called Box Cutter, which does a really similar thing to the Carve tool, except for it's a lot more powerful, and uh, you can do a lot more with it. That was one of the things that this tool didn't exist, and that tool was the only way to do it. But now there's a simple, quicker way to do it. I also use something called hard ops, which basically all of those things in the modifiers tab I was trying to show you. It adds shortcuts to them so that I can just like click a button on my mouse and it'll bring up a menu of the things that I like to use the most. Uh, Super easy. I also use a tab called or a extension called Machine Tools, which used to be free, but it's not anymore. And that also just adds a ton of shortcuts that make it a lot easier to add things. There's another great tool called Speed Sculpt, which adds a ton of tools to make it a lot easier to add stuff like curves and other things that Blender doesn't do naturally. There's really just a ton. Like I could probably spend another hour talking about the extensions I use. I used to use like 15 different ones, but I've narrowed it down to like 4 or 5 that I use most.
Yeah, Annie actually had a comment on that. She said, I'd say add-ons are still sort of Blender's bread and butter in a way. There's so many, and some have become built-in, added to current builds.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, I highly recommend using add-ons once you like get the hang of vanilla Blender because there's so many quicker ways to do things than what I was showing you today. But it involves you knowing more about how Blender works because some of these add-ons kind of glitch out, and then if they glitch out, you won't really know what's going wrong. But they're super useful, super helpful. It's kind of what makes Blender so good is because it's open source, it's so easily extensible, and so many people have made improvements to Blender that you can add on.
Do you have a source that you recommend for those add-ons that's you're not downloading some sort of spyware or whatnot?
Yeah, I mean a lot of the free add-ons are in that extensions section, which is great because it used to be you had to like find it on like a GitHub page and stuff. But a
Oh,
lot of the really good paid add-ons, which most of the add-ons I use are paid, they're usually not that expensive. They're like 10 to 15 bucks at the most. Blender Market, which just changed their name to Superhive, just stupid because it's so easy to remember Blender Market, but now you have to remember Superhive instead. I'm sure if you search for Blender Market, Superhive will come up though.
Jesse also asked, can you make your own brushes in Blender?
You can. It is complicated. You have to. So the way brushes work. Actually, okay. There's one more extension I want to mention. It's called Blender Kit. It is just like a ton of free models, brushes, and materials and textures and stuff. You can just drag and drop stuff right in. Um, if I had it open right now, I would show you, but I have some of my models on there. If you pay for it, you can get access to even more models. They also have brushes and stuff. But if you want to make brushes, you have to understand how alphas work. And alphas are kind of like the brush tip. So if I went into tool and I went to texture, I could add a new texture to the brush. I would have to import it. There's a whole bunch of extra steps, but I don't have any of my shortcuts here. I can't show you an alpha, but basically it just changes the shape of the brush tip to whatever. And you can also change the settings, uh, but it's complicated.
Yeah, I imagine there's tutorials online just for making brushes.
Yes, definitely. There's
Yeah,
tutorials online for everything, which is another great thing about Blender.
that's yeah, knowing there's a good tutorial community really helps keep software going.
Yeah, and if you know Python, you can just code stuff right into Blender very easily. That's how all these add-ons are made so quickly.
If you just know Python. I
You
love
just
that.
simply know Python. I don't know Python, but some people are born knowing Python, I think.
We have one last question from Jesse. Jesse has so many good questions. How do you typically use Blender in your comics work, if at all?
So I I make full scenes exactly like I showed you, except for I'll add everything to a scene. I'll add the floor, the background, everything. I once I have everything set in place the way that I like, I'll usually add that line art modifier at the end because it makes it a lot easier for Clip Studio to find the edges of the models, which is how I use the 3D base that I make in here. Basically, I'll render it out. I'll bring the render into Clip Studio, run it through the convert to lines and tones, and then I can sort of just draw and paint on top of it to add all the details that I was missing.
We do have one more question from Annie Ho. Do you have any tips on what kind of sculpting tutorials to look at? This made sculpting seem really fun.
I recommend watching people's speed sculpts because you'll learn a lot more than people going over the individual tools and their processes because it takes so long to sculpt stuff. But if you watch a lot of speed sculpts, you'll kind of see people's different techniques. You can even watch ZBrush tutorials and stuff like that, and it'll still have certain principles that will apply. There's no channels I can think of off the top of my head. Actually, Flycat is a really good one.
What was that again?
Flycat. That's a really good YouTube channel.
Fly cat.
This artist Flycat
Oh,
makes a ton of 3D models. They use a whole bunch of different processes, so you can learn really a lot about sculpting from them. But you can also find people that do streams where they sculpt stuff, and they'll kind of give you their little techniques. There's just so many ways that you can do stuff in Blender. It's like any other kind of art software. It's really like only limited to your imagination.
That's amazing. Everything that is possible with this. I think we do have to, it's 7:36 now, so we went over and this was great. I would love if everyone would put in the chat or unmute yourself. Thanks, Zach, for being here for this amazingly incredible tutorial.
Yeah, and if anybody ever has any questions about Blender, just at me in the co-op Discord, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Yeah. I mean, thank you so much for doing this. I know taking the time out to explain this to us and walk us through this tutorial and demoing it for yourself in advance to make sure it works. Like, it makes it so much less daunting. I really appreciate it.
Good, I'm glad. That's what I like to hear.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, everyone, I hope everyone has a good night. And we have tomorrow our next. Feel free to come back tomorrow for our next day of Nib and Ink Fest. Let's see, we have the Not Safe for Work and Adult Comics Portfolio Review. You do have to be 18 or older to attend that one. So hope to see everyone then. Zach, have a great night.
Thank you everybody for coming, and I hope that you all enjoy using Blender.
We will. Looking forward to it. Bye.
Recording